there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. Today's not going to be a lot of analysis or anything particularly special. I'm just going to go over a topic that I wanted to talk about for quite a while now, or just shed some light on, which is the top 10 cards from Modern Masters that are not being reprinted. Top 10 as far as value. So this is part 1 of the series. I might have part 2 out tomorrow that are the top 10 played cards not being printed in Modern Masters 2017, but this is going to be the list of the top 10 most expensive cards that missed the printing in Modern Masters 2017. Now, surprisingly, a lot of these on this list were actually reprinted in Modern Masters 2015. In fact, the estimated value of a Modern Masters 2015 booster box is now higher than the value of Modern Masters 2017, which is funny because you can still find boxes in the 230s, 240s, 250s range for Modern Masters 2015, whereas the price has been creeping up on Modern Masters 2017 to about the 220, 215, 220, 225 mark. So for an extra 15 bucks, it might be worthwhile just to go get one of those Modern Masters 2015 that everyone hated so much. So crazy, crazy times we live in, because of course when a huge reprint happens, the cards that are not printed in the most recent are going to spike up. So that's just nothing too special for this video. Let's just jump right into the top 10 list of cards that are not going to be reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. So before we get into that though, I just like to give an honorable mention. There are quite a few cards from the $40 to $45 price range. I thought for sure like Dark Confidant would be on this list and Mishra's Bauble, but they don't, not even Emrakul. So just a few of the cards that just barely missed the list was Sword of Fire and Ice, Dark Confidant, Mishra's Bauble, Emrakul, Aether Vial, Arcbound Ravager, and Ensnaring Bridge, just to name a few that didn't quite make the cut. And those are all above $40 or more. So for this particular list, the lowest price card is slightly under $50, and starting off our top 10 is Grove of the Burnwillows. Grove of the Burnwillows had been more expensive at one point, but I think that it is really the transition from the red Tron over to either white Tron, white-green Tron, or black-green Tron, not running Grove, and running the color combinations, of course, either the Golgari or the Selesnya color combinations. And so Grove is kind of tanked within the last few months, down from about, I think it was around 70 at its height. Now it's down to $50. So $50 is still quite expensive for a card in Modern. And if we ever do see people going back to the red list, I think that the red Tron is really good when you need to sweep out tokens or have a lot more game versus the early, like the hyper aggressive type strategies. Why black and white are kind of the go-to cards is they have a better sweeper if you really want to go into like Wrath of God or Damnation, but not really sweeper. They have better spot removal in the form of Fatal Push and in the form of Path to Exile. So that's why Grove of the Burnwillows, let's just pick up a Tron list here and see that a lot of the Trons are now, this one is a Lightning Bolt one, so Grove is in this particular one, but a lot of the Tron lists have moved over to the, now that I'm looking at these, it looks like a lot of these have actually gone back to the red, or maybe it's just pulling up lists of Trons that do have the Grove of the Burnwillows in. But here we go. Here's one that's perfectly will show you that they've gone over like Path to Exile as their go-to. So instead of running the Grove of the Burnwillows, this one has just decided to go with Razorverge Thickets in this slot. So that's a little bit of food for thought. If we do see the red Tron, the Pyroclasm / Lightning Bolt Tron, have a little bit of resurgence, Grove of the Burnwillows is one of those cards that hasn't been printed too often. It had a From the Vault Realms, I believe, printing, as well as, was it an Expedition? Let's go back and see if it did have an Expedition printing here, or nope, From the Vaults, and that's it. So it has a relatively low supply because Future Sight is extremely rare. From the Vaults Realms was quite a few years ago. I think it's about the point that those are extremely hard to come by. So I think the Grove of the Burnwillows will stabilize in price and start to go up in value, as Tron is definitely one of the go-to decks at the moment, as we are in a format that is basically, even though Death Shadow is quite big, Tron beats out all the decks that do beat out the Death Shadows. So it's kind of a rock, paper, scissors format right now. The Death Shadow aggro decks take out the slower decks, the Jund and Abzan and the heavy attrition or control-based strategies do very well against the Death Shadow decks. And then, of course, Tron beats those up because the looming threat of going to be able to establish Tron and just get so much value out of the cards like Wormcoil Engine and Ugin and even Karn Liberated is extremely good against those type of strategies. Alrighty, on to my number 9. Number 9 is a card that is also fallen out of favor recently. I think that it is near its peak, though, because it does see enough play in a lot of the blue control shells, which is Ancestral Vision. Ancestral Vision is also right around that $50 mark. It was in the dual deck. I believe Jace versus Chandra is the one it was in. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But other than that, it hasn't seen a printing since Time Spiral. It was recently unbanned. I mean, in the whole scope of things, it's one of the more recent unbannings with Ancestral Vision. It did see a little bit of play with cards that did try to cheat it in, but we haven't seen those type of strategies for quite a while. It does work with the Expertise type cards, so Expertise can force the cast. But again, the shells that really like Ancestral Vision have been the heavy blue control list, as you can see in this Esper list here. The Esper list will have 3 copies in the main and then additional 1 in the sideboard, because a deck like this is really trying to go the late game with the Walls, the Kitchen Finks, the Vendilion Clicks, Restoration Ale Snapcaster. So they're going the long haul with the Supreme Verdict, and it's going to be a way to fill back up the hand and eventually just win with like the Celestial Colonnades and the Snapcaster Mages. So these lists show up every now and again. They're quite good against mid-range decks, but they do suffer against Tron. And until I think Ancestral Vision really finds a home in like Grixis Delver or even Grixis Control, which has fallen out of favor recently, I think that we might stay around that $50 price tag, or if it does see another home, it can just shoot up incredibly fast. So right now it hits the number 9 at that $50 mark. Going on to number 8, here's one that I do think that is very poised for a price increase, but was reprinted in Modern Masters 1, and it was recently a Kaladesh Invention. So this one is Engineered Explosives. I really like Engineered Explosives right now because it is a very viable strategy against many of the go wide decks. It's a great sideboard card. It can be tutored up with like Trinket Mage. I've talked about how I love this card in my sideboard, and Engineered Explosives is just perfect for those 3-color decks, as it can really. So it says, destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Engineered Explosive. So a lot of decks have a lot of repetition, like Zoo decks, and you can put on 1 or 2 and sweep at least like half their board. And even if you just kill one thing, it doesn't target. You can get around Hexproof, which is really good against like the Bogles lists. And it's just an incredibly good sideboard card. It's just the scarcity of this card that is leading the price around the $50. It's creeping up. This is one of the cards that has seen significant gains in the past few days, increasing about $2. And again, a lot of like the Abzan decks love it. You even see it in Grixis Control, and even in Titan Shift. Even some of these Bring to Light, especially, that was the one that really liked that in the sideboard when they used to use the Bring to Light Skate Shift decks, because it's a great early control card. So I expect it to go up in value until inevitably it can maybe be reprinted. See, a lot of these cards, like this is the first one on the list that was reprinted in Modern Masters 1. I think that Modern Masters 2019 is going to be very awkward for them to reprint. I would not be surprised to see like a Modern Masters Anthologies type set where you get 8 of each pack. And that way Engineered Explosives can be reprinted. A lot of the Modern Masters 2015 can be reprinted. And everyone, all those can be back into the supply, but not in like such overwhelming numbers, because eventually there will be a point where Modern just can't handle all the new supply of these cards. All right, on to number 7, which is a card that sees play every now and again in sideboards. It currently does see sideboard play in like Eldrazi Tron, especially in other Tron, which is Crucible of Worlds. It's really the best way to combat Fulminator Mage strategies or even Ghost Quarter strategies, because if you can break up the Tron or the Eldrazi temples, it can be quite tough for the Eldrazi decks to keep up with tempo. Same thing with Tron. And so if you're going up a deck that really utilizes, like I think back in the day, Jund was starting to have a decent outlook against Tron because they were packing in like Fulminator Mages as well as Blood Moons, as well as Kolaghan's Commands to get back Fulminator Mages, and just rinse and repeat and really lock the opponent out of the Tron combination. So a lot of the Tron decks started putting Crucibles in the sideboard, and this is also a very popular card in Casual and Commander. You can play lands from your graveyard. Of course, this can be any land. If you're a self-land destruction and other people destruction deck in Commander, you're going to want one of these. And it really was just because this card didn't have a lot of printing. It was in 10th edition, it was in the 5th Dawn, and it also has recently was a Kaladesh Invention. But other than that, it still has a very low print run, and it was able to breach the $50 price tag just being mainly a sideboard and a casual card. So I think Crucible of Worlds is one of those that is eventually going to be reprinted in a supplemental product. But if the Fulminator Mage decks do start to become more popular again, like Living End, or if Jund just starts to incorporate it, or even Abzan, expect the Crucible of Worlds to start to gain back some of its value that it lost since the crash of Modern. On to number 6, which we're now really getting into the good stuff that has the majority of, or the opportunity to really increase in price. And in the past couple weeks, it has gone really spiked in price from $40 up to around the $55 price range, which is the Mox Opal. Of course, Mox Opal is played heavily in decks that, of course, utilize artifacts. So we're talking Eggs, we're talking Lantern Control, we're talking Pure Steel Paladin, and the flagship deck that Mox Opal is used in the most popular, Affinity. Affinity has really been around here since the inception of Modern. There's been times when it's been the best deck, there's been times when it's not even breached Tier 1, but it's always consistently been a Tier 2 deck or better. And Mox Opal is a pivotal piece in the Affinity deck, and it has to go up. I think it's unfortunately one of those cards that is going to keep back a lot of different archetypes, looking at Pure Steel Paladin especially, because these are a must. The fast mana of this card is a must. A lot of people have suggested that Mox Opal is on the short list for banning, or at least the watch list. It's one of the more fair fast mana cards, because you have to do a lot of work to really, and the legendary part of it's no Simian Spirit Guide in my book. I think it's a lot harder to really enable. Of course, you do get the ability to tap every turn for a mana, but it's one of those cards that is an all-in strategy that it could easily be punished. So I think that Mox Opal, though, will continue to increase in price. If you absolutely are planning on building Affinity or Pure Steel Paladin, you better pick up these cards as soon as possible, because most decks that run Mox Opal do require a playset. So that's the bad news with Mox Opal compared to the previous cards we've talked about, like Engineered Explosives and Crucibles, just being more of a sideboard strategy. Alright, so on to number 5. This is really the first card that sees very little play in Modern. It is more of a casual card. Atraxa really spiked this backup in value, and this is the casual of all casual cards, but has seen it play before in the doubling all Planeswalkers type decks, because doubling Season can make a lot of Planeswalkers just go ultimate immediately when they come out, because of an effect to put one or more tokens under your control, or effects would place one or more counter on a permanent, it doubles it. So of course, with like the Kaladesh having a huge energy counter, even like clues from Shadow of Innistrad, this card just gets more and more juicy with each set spoiled. They've tried to dumb down doubling Season in different like Primal Vigor and what's the Parallel Lives type cards from the previous printings, sets that were printed after doubling Season. So they obviously don't want more of these out in supply. But it really is approaching at $60 now, and it's approaching $65 very quickly. A lot of people thought it would be reprinted in Modern Masters 3 because of the token strategy for Celestia, but it didn't. It missed the printing. So of course, if you want this for casual play, I think you have to pick it up, unfortunately. It's one of those cards that is going to continue to creep up in value. On to the number 4. Number 4 is a card that does see a ton of play and is my pick for the card to really outvalue in the short term and long term all of the cards on this list, because it has been the number 1 played card in Modern in a time when Infect and Eldrazi, not Eldrazi Tron, but Bant Eldrazi was the biggest decks in the format. And then if you get into like Nightfall, and there's a ton of decks that just love, Abzan and Company, or even the Abzan Chord or Kiki Chord. And the card I'm talking about is Noble Hierarch. Noble Hierarch is $60. It's going to increase very, very quickly, because I think the crash was just that people thought when they saw Stoic Angel spoiled, they said, yeah, Noble Hierarch, duh. Okay, Bant wants mana. We need to put Noble Hierarch in this set. It did not get a reprinting in Modern Masters 2017. So I think it's going to recover its value. I mean, it started crashing, $65 started crashing, just in anticipation for a reprint in Modern Masters 2017. I think a lot of the 4-color commanders, of course, all of them, but except the one that doesn't have black in it, doesn't have, or that, I think almost, the one that doesn't have green in it or the one that has, actually that doesn't go in many of the commander decks, I thought, because of how the 3 colors, how many of them have that 3-color combination? Most of them, right? Anyway, so Noble Hierarch, I think, is just going to continue to go up. A lot of the decks that want Noble Hierarch really want it. So we're talking in the numbers of 3 to 4. There are a few like Abzan I've seen with like 2 in there. But for the most part, Sultai Control even wants it, which is crazy. I mean, they just care about the blue and the green. But yeah, Infect, if Infect ever does become the aggro strategy of choice, it did get hurt by the Gataxian Probe banning. A lot of people have gone over to Death Shadow just because Death Shadow is better late game than Infect is. But if we need to have a format that is really, really good at pushing out damage insanely fast, of course that is Infect. That is the go-to deck. It's never going to go anywhere. It's been a tier 2 or better strategy again since the inception of Modern. Bant Eldrazi still seems to be one of the most played decks, as well as Abzan midrange. So this card is not going anywhere. We've seen it in Zoo. We've seen it in, like I said, Nightfall. Yeah, Bant Spirits now looks to be like a flavor of the week type deck, and Noble Hierarch goes in all of those decks. And I think that just from the sheer amounts of decks that want this as a 4 of, it is going to pass up the next 3 on my list. So on to that number 3. Number 3 has started to get a lot of price increase because it is a great answer towards Death Shadow and a good answer towards like other decks that have a lot of 1s and 2 drops. Especially if you're not playing 1s and 2 drops yourself, you're going to want this in your sideboard because it's so easy to shut down so many different decks. And this is Chalice of the Void. The 2 decks that really like this are Eldrazi Tron and like the Scape Shift or Titan Shift type decks, because they need a way to slow down opposing decks. Like really their only holes are going to be against like Burn, for example, or Death Shadow. And if they can put the Chalice on 1, that shuts down like usually like half the cards in those particular aggressive decks. So we had a huge spike right after Kaladesh. It was a Kaladesh invention, but of course that just wasn't enough to really increase the supply and decrease the demand. And so it jumped from about $45 all the way up to $60 and has been approaching $65. And again, if these Titan Shift type decks or Eldrazi type decks do continue to see the popularity in Modern, the only bad part of this is we don't have what I call kind of the trickle effect, to where people getting into decks that are being reprinted. So looking at like Death Shadow, for example, or Jund, or all those type of decks that see huge Tarmogoyf reprints and Liliana reprints, so it's going to add a bunch of people into wanting to play those decks. Chalice doesn't really work in too many of those type of decks, so you don't see that trickle effect from people needing to pick up Chalices because they picked up a bunch of Goyfs, for example. But a lot of if Modern as a whole starts gaining popularity just because of the reprints from Modern Masters 3, then Chalice will go up in value. I do expect, though, Noble Hierarch to start outcompeting Chalice of the Void just because of how versatile the card is. Now, Chalice does see a lot of legacy, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot of legacy, especially in like the different sideboards and just a lot of strategies want to shut down 1-drops or 0-drops. I think even, does Vintage even run this? Yes, it does. Ravager Shops does run the Vintage, or does run Chalice. So again, a lot of decks do like 4 of them, but it isn't uncommon to see 1 or 2 ofs in sideboards. Alright, so on to the number 2 card. The number 2 card was a Expedition, and has started to crash in value recently, but is starting to get a little bit of an uptick because of Bant Spirits and Bant Nightfall, and the Bant Eldrazi doesn't want it, but Bant Company is starting to see, even Bant Humans. There are a lot of these Bant strategies, and Bogles really loves this card, and the card I'm talking about is Horizon Canopy. Horizon Canopy really is so expensive because it only has that future sight printing, so the supply of this card is like next to nothing compared to the demand. And if Bogles ever does take off, Bogles, of course, is the deck that usually wants 4 of these. It sees 1-ofs and 2-ofs in Abzan decks and every now and again in Bant decks, but Bogles goes all in on this particular deck. So being able just to have to pay a life to add a green or a white, and then the ability to sort of sacrifice to draw a card is huge for a deck that wants to minimize variance as much as possible. Bogles fits that bill. It's approaching $65 at this point. Again, it has been crashing in value recently, but I think that if Bant Spirit starts taking off all the aforementioned decks, this could easily approach $70 within the next few months. Just with people picking up these pieces, even as 1-ofs in the various Abzan decks, I could definitely see a huge price gain for the Horizon Canopy. So on to the major drum roll, and this card is one that was like a $40 card, but it just leapfrogged all of these, just in like overnight leapfrogged all of these. So I don't know if we're going to have some price adjustment to this card, and then it will fall down from its number 1 slot. The card I'm talking about is Karn Liberated, and of course one of the reasons why I think Karn Liberated has jumped in value was the kind of resurgence of the black-green Tron and the white-green Tron lists really becoming very popular. And so Karn overnight had a huge price spike because right when it was spoiled that Domri was going to be the other Planeswalker, people already just basically thought, yep, Karn's out of this. And so it went from $55 up to $70, virtually overnight. And New Phyrexia was a heavily open set, but it was still before they really started printing sets into Oblivion, like Return to Ravnica onward. Innistrad onward actually had quite a bit of printing. New Phyrexia is one of the last panic sets. Like, Wizards stopped reprinting it, or stopped printing it while it was still in Standard, and then it took off, and they just decided not to do another print run of it. And a lot of people were upset by that because you couldn't even find boxes of New Phyrexia while it was still in Standard. And so it was very annoying. But this card, Karn Liberated, has just continued to go up in value since these Tron decks have been popular. I think it's going to stay, like I said, I think we're going to start seeing a little bit of price adjustment, and this could go back down to the $65, $60 range. We could actually even see some increase, though. You never know with the fickleness of the modern market. But I still think that Noble Hierarch is going to take the slot for the number 1. We also have a few cards that are not even close to this list that I think could go up a ton in value, and I'll be talking more of that on part 2. A lot of these like $25, $30 cards that didn't see a reprinting, that have a lot more playability in these decks, that did get reprinting. So most of the cards on this list were like Modern Masters 2, Modern Masters 1, that they just did not decide to reprint in this particular set, and yeah, that's why they've been increasing. But I think the hidden gems are really in the decks that do want cards that were not included, like Mishra's Bauble, for example, in the Death Shadows deck, Fulminator Mage. Those could see huge price spikes within the next coming weeks. So I guess the last topic for this video was like, what is the overall health in Modern? I think that 2017 is going to be a very good year for everything that wasn't reprinted in Modern Masters 3, just because it's going to bring a lot of people into Modern. But 2018, I expect Modern to crash horrendously unless they can add some sort of vision to Modern. Remember, right before Modern Masters 3 was really hyped and we started seeing the spoilers, Wizards basically cut a lot of the focal point from Modern Masters to Standard, saying we're going to do less Grand Prix, we're not going to do a Team Worlds, we're not going to do a lot of the Team Modern events that we had planned, and they didn't even showcase a Grand Prix around this set. So I still think unless that vision changes, or unless that attitude changes toward Modern, and if Modern Masters 3 ends up only, alleviating like half of the cost of modern, and still these other cards start compensating or overcompensating for the value decrease just because of the market like picking up the tab and speculating into the rest of the cards that didn't see a reprint for anticipation of some sort of huge modern gain, then we still might see modern very inaccessible to the average player, and we start to see the power level from standard to modern, the gap grow and grow and grow with each new set coming out. And we could just have a repeat of 2016 where standard was stale, modern was stale, and people are looking for something else. So I don't know how I feel about investing in modern. I wouldn't touch most of these cards with the exception of maybe Noble Hierarch, but I still don't think the gains are there. I still think there's a lot of Modern Masters 2 boxes out there. It's people are starting, a lot of vendors held on to these booster boxes. They were looking for the day where they could actually sell them for MSRP. And now the time, it's that time. So I'm actually starting to think we're going to see a lot more supply enter into the card pool just from people now cracking Modern Masters 2 boxes. But I could be wrong here. Of course, I appreciate all of the discussion in the comment section below. And if there was any card that I missed, I think I did a pretty good job combing through the prices. Let me know in the comment section below, as well as your pick for the card that is going to increase the most. My call is Noble Hierarch. I don't see any evidence that the rest of these cards are going to outperform Noble Hierarch, with maybe the exception of Doubling Season, just because the Commander crowd is so large. Commander is just huge and is growing in popularity because of kind of this backlash against kind of the competitive scene. So we'll have to wait and see 2 months down the road if I'm right or not. Check back this video, timestamp it, whatever. I appreciate all of the support for the Market Monday. Of course, if you enjoy this series, come and leave me a tip on the Patreon. This is one of the tiers to support the Market Monday. And of course, as long as it's popular, as long as people want to have these sort of videos, I'll do them on my channel. This has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.